I knew something was off the second my truck rolled up in front of my house. That tiny prickle at the back of your neck when the picture isn't how you left it. The porch light I always kept off was suddenly glowing. The front gate I always latched was hanging half open, and there was a faint scrape on the doorframe like someone had tested it with more confidence than skill. And my first thought wasn't burglar, because in our neighborhood we worried less about criminals and a whole lot more about one very specific threat: the president of our HOA. My name is Ethan Ward, and I live in a quiet little development called Silverbrook Meadows, the kind of place the brochure sells with words like community, serenity, and high standards, which I later learned was code for we hired a control freak with a clipboard. That control freak being Lydia Caro, president of the Silverbrook Meadows Owners Association. Woman with the sharpest bob haircut in 3 counties and a permanent expression like she smelled something slightly off, especially if it belonged to me. What Lydia didn't know, what she absolutely could not have imagined when she decided tonight was the night to cross my line, was that while I was gone, my German Shepherd Ranger was home, and Ranger doesn't do uninvited guests. When I first moved into Silverbrook Meadows, I honestly thought I'd finally made it to the soft landing at the end of 20 years of grinding construction work, cheap motels, and highway noise. My place was nothing flashy, just a 1-story brick house with a long porch, a backyard big enough for a grill and a lawn chair, and most importantly, enough room for Ranger, who isn't just a dog to me. He's family, a failed police K-9, washed out of the program not because he wasn't smart enough, but because he was too independent. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's my kind of dog. Those first days were almost painfully peaceful, unpacking boxes at my own pace, repainting the porch rail, drinking coffee while Ranger sat beside me, ears twitching at every bird and delivery truck, and I actually said out loud one evening, "This is it. We made it. Buddy, this is peace." And if the universe had a sense of humor, that's the moment it started sharpening Lydia Caro clipboard. She appeared on day 3, marching up my driveway in a bright blue blazer with a Silverbrook Meadows HOA badge on a lanyard like she was federal, stuck out her hand, and said, "I'm Lydia Caro, president of the Silverbrook Meadows Owners Association." With that grip people use when they're not saying welcome, they're saying, "I'm in charge." Her eyes already sliding past me to my garage, my porch, my dog. "That's Ranger," I told her as he watched her from the steps, relaxed but alert. "He's friendly unless you give him a reason not to be." And I meant it as a joke, but her smile pinched at the edges. "We do have regulations regarding large breeds," she said, like the words tasted bad. "They can be intimidating. I'll drop off our pet guidelines." I laughed, thought she was kidding. She wasn't. Within a week, I had 3 friendly notices stuffed in my mailbox. One about my trash can being visible from a certain angle if you walked halfway up my driveway and leaned over like a stalker, one about the temporary flag I'd taped up while waiting for a mount, and one about Ranger barking at 7:15 a.m. when the mail truck clanked past. And look, my dog isn't that guy who barks for 8 hours straight. He's a living alarm system. He barks when something gets too close, does his job, but apparently Lydia thought the position of almighty noise arbiter had been granted directly to her by the gods of Silverbrook Meadows. The first HOA meeting is when I realized this wasn't just paperwork, it was personal. I sat in the back, hoping to stay invisible, but Lydia spotted me like a heat-seeking missile. "Ah, our newest homeowner, Mr. Ward," she said into the microphone, turning 30 pairs of eyes my way. "We've had several concerns about your German Shepherd and noise disturbances." And half the room looked apologetic. The other half just looked grateful someone else was on the chopping block. "You mean the single bark at the mailman?" I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I'll have Ranger draft a written apology." A few people snorted, then stared at their shoes when Lydia's glare swept the room. "That kind of attitude disrupts community harmony," she snapped, and I leaned back, gave her the smallest smile that said, "Lady, you picked the wrong neighbor to bully." From there, she escalated like it was her full-time job, slow walks past my house with her phone held just a little too high, peering through the slats of my backyard fence under the guise of landscaping checks, measuring tape on my shrubs, letter after letter, $50 for a trash can no one could see, a warning about my porch light temperature not matching approved warm white, a citation for a wind chime that had belonged to my late wife. That one nearly made me see red. I started keeping everything in a folder, every petty fine, every absurd threat, because part of me knew this wasn't just about rules. This was about power, and people like Lydia Caro don't stop when you ask nicely. They stop when something stops them. And as it turned out, that something had 4 legs, a thick coat, and a training history the HOA handbook did not have a clause for. The more I pushed back, the more Lydia doubled down. She started jiggling my side gate late at night, or someone did, but Ranger only rumbled like that when it was human, not raccoon, and each time I'd step onto the porch and see nothing, just the tail end of a silhouette hustling away down Maple Crest Drive. One neighbor, Joe Miller, pulled me aside and whispered that he'd seen Lydia crouched behind his hedge with a zoom lens, aimed straight at my yard, and when he asked her what she was doing, she hissed, "Official inspection," and stalked off. One rainy afternoon she pushed it too far, walked straight up my driveway with an umbrella and that stupid clipboard, bent down with her tape measure like she was triangulating an airstrike on my shrubs, and I opened the door, coffee in hand, and said, "Lose something," in that tone that's halfway between polite and, "I'm done with you." "Routine inspection," Lydia replied, not even bothering to fake warmth. "Community safety demands vigilance." "This isn't your property line," I told her, stepping onto the porch, Ranger behind me, hackles just barely raised. "You cross it again, I'll treat it like a break-in, not a routine inspection. That was your warning, you don't get a second." For a second, just one, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not fear, exactly, but the realization that I wasn't playing her game. Then she spun on her heel and marched away, heels stabbing water out of the puddles like she was trying to hurt the concrete. The thing about people like Lydia is they don't hear no as a boundary, they hear it as a dare. So when a 3-day job came up out of town, I hesitated. Normally I'd board Ranger or bring him, but the hair on my arm said, "Don't leave the house empty," and my trust in him was a lot bigger than my trust in her. I double-checked the locks, texted Joe Miller and said, "She's been circling hard. If you see her near my porch while I'm gone, call me." And he replied, "She thinks she's queen of Silverbrook Meadows, but I got you, and good thing you've got Ranger." The morning I left, Ranger sat in the doorway like a soldier waiting for orders, ears forward, and I knelt, grabbed his scruff, and said quietly, "Guard the house, buddy. Don't let her win." His tail thumped once, slow and sure. When I pulled out of Silverbrook Meadows, I saw Lydia's silver SUV parked 2 houses down, her sunglasses on, head tilted like she was scrolling her phone, and we both pretended not to see each other. "Day 1, Joe texted, "She walked up to your porch, pretended to check your railing. Ranger barked, she bolted, and I grinned, picturing her retreat. Day 2, lights on near your place, didn't look like you. Ranger was going crazy, and that wiped the smile right off my face. Day 3, the message I'd been expecting and dreading. Pretty sure she went in, saw her slip through your gate. Then Ranger went quiet, and that silence scared me more than the barking. I drove home like the gas pedal owed me money. Every red light torture, picturing Lydia in my living room with a camera, digging through drawers, staging photos to invent violations, maybe trying to corner Ranger, not understanding that he wasn't a scared house pet. He was a trained K9 with a job. By the time I turned onto my street, the sky was that weird half dark, my gate was wide open, my porch light blazing, my front door not quite closed, and my gut did a slow roll. I killed the engine, left the door hanging open, and walked up the path with all my senses stretched tight. From inside I heard it, the shuffle of papers, a drawer sliding, and underneath it all, a low, continuous growl, vibrating the air like a distant storm. I pushed the front door with one hand and stepped inside. The scene looked almost theatrical, if it hadn't been my actual life. Lydia Caro in my living room, blazer wrinkled, hair frizzed, one hand in my side table drawer, the other clutching her clipboard like a talisman, flashlight on my paperwork, and between her and the way out, planting all 100 pounds of himself firmly in her path, was Ranger. He wasn't lunging, he wasn't snapping, he was doing something a lot scarier, standing still, muscles coiled, ears forward, eyes locked on her, growl rolling out of his chest, telling her in a language she didn't speak that she was exactly where she deserved to be. "Good dog," she squeaked, flashlight trembling. "I'm the president of this community. I'm here on official business." "Official business?" I said from the doorway. and she jerked like someone had hit her with a taser. Breaking and entering, is that in the bylaws now? Her face went sheet white under the makeup, her eyes ponging between me and Ranger, who didn't even glance back, just held his ground like we'd rehearsed this, which we hadn't. But it's funny how loyalty doesn't need rehearsal. This isn't what it looks like, she stammered, voice climbing. I received reports of suspicious activity. As president of the Silverbrook Meadows Owners Association, I have the right to inspect. You have the right to stand on the sidewalk. I cut in, moving a few steps into the room. You do not have the right to be inside my house while I'm gone. You do not have the right to open my drawers. And you definitely do not have the right to be scared of a dog who hasn't taken a single step toward you. Call him off, she shrieked as Ranger shifted his weight, growl deepening. He's dangerous. I snapped my fingers, sit, and Ranger dropped instantly, never breaking eye contact with her, and I watched that land. The realization that he wasn't out of control, he was under control, just not hers. See the difference? I said quietly. You use power to try to scare people. He uses it to protect what's his, and right now that includes my living room. Outside, movement caught my eye, silhouettes gathering on the sidewalk, faces pressed near my front window, phones raised, and it hit me that Lydia wasn't just caught. She was being seen, and for someone who ruled by image, that was worse than any ticket. You know what happens next, I told her, calm in a way I hadn't felt in weeks. You stay exactly where you are. Ranger makes sure of that. And I call the police, or you try to bolt, and he reminds you why you never should have crossed this threshold. For a woman who loved hearing her own voice, Lydia Caro suddenly had nothing left to say. I called 911 in the same tone I used to order takeout, gave my address, said, yeah, I've got an intruder. She's the HOA president. I caught her going through my stuff. My dog's keeping her from leaving. And I could almost hear the dispatcher raise an eyebrow. But they sent a car. While we waited, Lydia tried every trick in her book. First outrage. This is harassment. You can't keep me here. I'll sue you. I'll have you removed from Silverbrook Meadows. Then bargaining. Let's just forget this happened. No more fines. No more inspections. We can make this go away. And finally, pure panic when someone outside yelled, "We're getting all of this on video." "You can't film me," she screamed toward the window. "This is illegal." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You've been filming people for months with your phone over their fences," I said. "Welcome to your own rules." When the squad car pulled up, lights washing my front lawn in red and blue, the neighbors shifted like an audience as Officer Carter Hale and Officer Mia Torres stepped onto the porch. Hale looked through the open door, took in Lydia, Ranger, and me in one long glance. "What are we looking at, Mr. Ward?" he asked. "Uninvited HOA inspection," I said, nodding at Lydia. I got home, gate open, door unlocked, found her inside going through my drawers. My dog did what he's trained to do, held the position. "That's a lie," Lydia burst out. "He trapped me. He threatened me. I was trying to ensure compliance with community standards as president of the Silverbrook Meadows Owners Association." "In his living room?" Officer Torres asked, one eyebrow up. "You had written consent to be inside his home?" Silence. "That's trespassing, ma'am," Officer Hale said. "Matter of fact, title doesn't change that." The murmurs outside turned to quiet cheers. A couple of neighbors clapped. One whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. About time somebody told her that. And I saw it hit Lydia. The realization that the fear she'd used as currency was gone. "Do you want to press charges?" Hale asked me. For a second, I pictured it. Court dates, lawyers, the whole slow grind. And then I looked at my front window, at phone screens glowing like 100 tiny judgment seats, and I realized the real punishment had already started. "Not tonight," I said. "Write it up, put it on record," but honestly, her reputation's serving a longer sentence than the county would give her. They walked her out anyway, not cuffed, but not in control either, past the neighbors she'd bullied, past Joe Miller, who said, "Guess the rules apply to you too. Huh, Lydia," and past Ranger, who stood in the doorway beside me, tail giving one slow wag like a salute as she passed. After that night, Silverbrook Meadows shifted. Videos made their way onto local Facebook groups, then onto TikTok, then into 1,000 private messages. People compared notes, like survivors after a storm. An older vet named Mr. Halpern admitted she'd fined him twice for flying a flag. A young mom said she'd been cited because her kids' bikes leaned against the garage too long. Everyone had a story, but until they'd seen her trapped in my living room, no one had believed she could actually be stopped. The board called an emergency meeting, and this time Lydia Caro didn't sit at the front with her gavel. She sat at the back, small and brittle, while the new interim president, Mark Ellison, cleared his throat and said, "In light of recent events and credible reports of abuse of authority, we're voting to remove Ms. Caro as president of the Silverbrook Meadows Owners Association," and the tally wasn't even close. Her title vanished in a single raised hand vote. I could have let it end there, could have sat back on my porch with a beer and let the neighborhood rewrite itself, but injustice doesn't quite leave your bones that easily. So at the next meeting I walked in with my thick folder of every fine, every bogus notice, every petty threat, laid it on the table in front of Mark Ellison, and said, "This isn't just annoyance, this is harassment and trespass. And if the HOA wants to prove it's different now, you'll wipe all of this and apologize, or I'll let a lawyer sort through it." He didn't even hesitate. The board voted to void every citation, not just mine, but a whole stack of others, issued a written apology to the community, and created a brand new policy that no board member could step foot on someone's property without written consent. As for Lydia, she sold her house a few months later and disappeared into another subdivision in another town. And I like to think somewhere a poor new neighborhood is learning what a Caro clause is the hard way. These days, my life is simple in the way I'd hoped for at the beginning. I sit on my porch in Silverbrook Meadows, beer in hand, Ranger stretched at my feet like a furry security system. The only letters in my mailbox are boring and blessedly fine, free. Kids leave their bikes wherever, flags fly, wind chimes sing, and the only gate that opens at night is mine when I come home. Every so often, someone walking by will look at Ranger and grin. There's the hero of Maple Crest Drive, and he just wags his tail, clueless that he toppled a tyrant by doing exactly what he was born and trained to do: protect his home and his person. The funny thing is, this whole story started because one woman thought her clipboard gave her more power than the law, and ended because a dog understood boundaries better than she ever did. So yeah, we got our cinematic justice, we got our closure, I got my peace back, and Ranger got a new nickname: the HOA's worst nightmare. Now it's your turn. If you were in my shoes, dealing with a power-tripping HOA Karen breaking into your home and hiding behind community rules to threaten your family, backhand index pointing right, would you forgive her and just let the public embarrassment be her punishment? Backhand index pointing right. Or would you take her to court and make an example out of people who abuse their power to walk all over others? And one more question. When a loyal dog stands its ground and protects its owner from someone like that, is it just a pet? Or is it actually doing the right thing better than most adults? Share your own HOA/Karen or nightmare neighbor story in the comments, so anyone who's been treated unfairly knows they're not alone.